Private Riley Chen stood at barely 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed less than most of the gear. Her fellow soldiers carried into the field. From the moment she arrived at the forward operating base in the mountainous border region, the whispers started. Too small. Too weak. A liability waiting to happen. Her platoon sergeant, a gruff veteran named Dawson, made his opinion clear during her first day. Listen, Chen. I don't care what they taught you in basic training. Out here, size matters. Strength matters. When things go sideways, we need people who can carry their weight and someone else's if necessary. I'm not sure you can do that. Riley had heard variations of this speech her entire military career. At 23 years old, she'd spent 3 years proving herself over and over, only to start from zero each time she transferred to a new unit. Her service record was spotless. Her fitness scores exceeded standards. Her marksmanship was exceptional. But none of that seemed to matter when people took one look at her and saw only her size. The other soldiers in her unit weren't openly hostile, but they weren't welcoming either. They worked around her rather than with her, assigning her to lighter duties and easier tasks. During patrol rotations, they paired her with the strongest soldiers, clearly expecting she'd need help. During equipment checks, they questioned whether she could handle the standard loadout. Only one person treated her differently. Corporal James Martinez had served 2 tours and carried himself with quiet confidence. He watched Riley during training exercises and seemed to assess her based on performance rather than appearance. You're faster than most of the unit, he commented one day after a conditioning run where Riley had finished in the top 3, and your shooting is solid. Don't let Dawson get in your head. It's not wrong though, Riley said, frustration evident in her voice. I am smaller. I can't carry as much weight as the bigger soldiers. I can't physically overpower someone in hand-to-hand combat. So war isn't just about brute strength. It's about tactics, speed, accuracy, and mental toughness. You've got 3 out of 4, and I'm betting you've got the 4th one too, even if you haven't had to prove it yet. Riley wanted to believe him, but years of being underestimated had taken their toll. She'd worked twice as hard as everyone else just to be considered half as capable. The constant need to prove herself was exhausting. The base where Riley's unit was stationed sat on a strategic hill overlooking a vital supply route. It was a small outpost, home to just 30 soldiers, with minimal fortifications and limited resources. Their mission was simple: maintain presence, monitor the route, and report any suspicious activity. It wasn't considered a high-risk assignment. That assessment was about to prove catastrophically wrong. Intelligence reports had been indicating increased hostile activity in the region for weeks, but headquarters deemed the threats low level. Small groups, poorly organized, nothing the base couldn't handle. Riley noticed the reports during her shifts in the command post and felt uneasy. The pattern of movement suggested something more coordinated than random, militant activity. She mentioned her concerns to Sergeant Dawson, who dismissed them immediately. Chen, intelligence analysis isn't your job. Your job is to follow orders and try not to slow down your unit. Let the professionals handle the thinking. The rebuke stung, but Riley stayed quiet. She'd learned that pushing back only reinforced people's negative opinions. Better to stay silent, wait for opportunities too. Prove her worth through actions rather than words. Those opportunities came sooner than anyone expected. On a quiet Tuesday morning, with most of the unit preparing for a routine patrol, the communications specialist picked up unusual radio chatter. Multiple groups were moving toward their position from different directions. Within minutes, the situation became clear. This wasn't a small raid or a probing attack. A coordinated assault force was converging on their base, and they were heavily outnumbered. The nightmare scenario every small outpost feared was becoming reality. Riley's unit was about to face the fight of their lives. The alarm shattered the morning calm. Soldiers scrambled to defensive positions as Sergeant Dawson barked orders. Riley grabbed her rifle and headed to her assigned post on the eastern perimeter, her heart pounding but her hands steady, through binoculars. She could see movement in the tree line approximately 400 meters out. Lots of movement. This wasn't a small harassment force. This was a serious attack with serious numbers. All positions. This is command. The radio crackled. We count approximately 60 to 80 hostiles approaching from multiple vectors. Air support has been requested but won't arrive for at least 40 minutes. We hold this position. Repeat, we hold this position. 60 to 80 against 30. The math was brutal. Riley checked her ammunition and prepared for what was coming. The attack began with mortar fire. Explosions erupted around the base, sending dirt and debris flying. Riley pressed herself against the sandbag barrier, feeling the concussive force of nearby impacts. When the mortar stopped, the assault came. Hostile forces emerged from the tree line, advancing in tactical formations. They were well-trained and well-equipped, not the disorganized militants intelligence had predicted. Riley opened fire, her shots controlled and accurate. Around her, other soldiers did the same. And the initial wave faltered under the defensive fire, but there were so many of them. For every attacker that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. They were using cover effectively, advancing in bounds, suppressing the defenders with heavy fire while others moved forward. Chen. Dawson's voice came through her radio. We need someone on the 50 cal on the North Tower. Jackson's been hit. Can you get there? The North Tower was exposed, elevated above the rest of the base. It had the best field of fire, but also drew the most enemy attention. Jackson had been one of the biggest, strongest soldiers in the unit, and even he'd been hit. On my way, Riley responded without hesitation. She sprinted across the compound, bullets kicking up dust around her feet. Her small size actually helped here. She was a harder target to hit. She reached the tower ladder and climbed fast, her light weight letting her move quickly up the rungs. Jackson lay slumped at the top, blood soaking his shoulder. Riley dragged him away from the exposed position and quickly assessed his wound. Not immediately life-threatening, but he needed medical attention. Sorry, Chen, Jackson mumbled through gritted teeth. Couldn't hold it. You did good, Riley assured him. I've got it now. She moved to the heavy machine gun, a 50 caliber monster that weighed more than 70 pounds. The weapon's recoil was legendary, known for bruising the shoulders of soldiers twice Riley's size. Dawson had probably sent her here thinking she couldn't handle it. Maybe hoping she'd refuse and he could criticize her later. Riley didn't care about his motivations. The North Tower covered the main approach, and without suppressing fire from this position, the base would be overrun. She settled behind the gun, checked the ammunition feed, and acquired targets. The 50 cal roared to life. The recoil slammed into Riley's shoulder with tremendous force, but she'd braced properly and maintained control. She walked fire across the advancing enemy positions, the heavy rounds devastating anything they hit. Attackers dove for cover. Their advance stalled. Good shooting. Martinez's voice came through the radio. Keep that pressure up. Riley's shoulder throbbed with each burst, but she ignored the pain. She shifted fire to new targets, disrupting enemy movements, forcing them to stay in cover rather than advancing. The tactical situation started to stabilize, but the enemy wasn't finished. They concentrated fire on the North Tower, trying to eliminate the threat Riley posed. Bullets whined past her head. Rounds impacted the sandbags around her, sending sand spraying. One round struck the tower's metal support just inches from her position, the ricochet screaming off into the distance. Riley kept firing. Fear was present, a cold knot in her stomach, but it didn't control her. She'd trained for this. She'd prepared for this. All those hours on the range, all those fitness tests, all that mental conditioning. It all came together now. An explosion rocked the tower. A rocket-propelled grenade had struck the base of the structure. The entire platform shuddered, and Riley felt it tilt slightly. The tower was damaged, but still standing. Barely. Chen, get out of there, Dawson ordered. That tower's not stable. Negative, Riley responded, firing another burst. If I leave this position, they'll overrun the north side. I can hold it. That's an order, Private. Riley ignored him. She could see what Dawson couldn't from his position. The enemy was massing for another push on the north approach. If they breached there, the base would fall. Someone had to hold this position. Tower stability be damned. She adjusted her aim and prepared for the next wave. Her small frame braced behind the massive weapon, refusing to abandon her post. The enemy's second assault was more aggressive than the first. They'd identified the North Tower as the key defensive position and were determined to neutralize it. Riley watched through the gun's sights as at least 20 fighters moved toward her. Positioned in a coordinated rush, she opened fire, the 50 cal thundering. The first fighters fell, but others kept coming. Riley's world narrowed to the essential elements: target, aim, fire, adjust, repeat. Her shoulders screamed in protest from the constant recoil, but she pushed through the pain. The tower shuddered again. Whether from another hit or simply structural damage from the previous strike, Riley couldn't tell. The metal groaned beneath her, and the platform's tilt increased noticeably. She had maybe minutes before the whole thing collapsed. "Chen, serious. You need to evacuate now." Martinez's voice cut through the radio traffic. Unlike Dawson's order, this sounded like genuine concern rather than doubt in her abilities. "I hold until air support arrives or this tower falls," Riley responded through gritted teeth. "Tell everyone else to focus on their sectors." "I've got North covered," she continued, firing in controlled bursts, making every round count. The attackers had reached the outer fence line now, trying to breach the perimeter. Riley adjusted her fire, targeting the breach points, forcing them back. Her radio crackled with updates from other positions. The west side was holding, but taking casualties. The south position had repelled 2 assaults. The east was quiet for now, but everyone knew that wouldn't last. The enemy was probing for weaknesses. They had the numbers to exploit any gap in the defense. Riley's ammunition counter was dropping rapidly. The tower held crates of extra ammunition, but reaching them meant leaving the gun. She fired until the current belt was exhausted, then made a split-second decision. She rolled away from the gun, grabbed a fresh ammunition can, and dragged it back to the weapon. Her small size meant less mass to move. She completed the reload in seconds. As she settled back behind the gun, a bullet struck the sandbag next to her head. The shot had been close, too close. She spotted the shooter, a sniper positioned in a tree about 300 meters out. He was specifically targeting her, trying to eliminate the North Tower's firepower. Riley swung the heavy machine gun toward the tree. The 50 cal wasn't a precision weapon, but at this range, it didn't need to be. She fired a sustained burst, the heavy rounds shredding through the tree trunk and foliage. The sniper's position disintegrated under the onslaught. "Sniper eliminated. North sector," she reported calmly, then returned fire to the advancing infantry. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Riley's arms burned from controlling the weapon's weight and recoil. Her shoulder was surely bruised, possibly worse, but adrenaline kept the worst of the pain at bay. Sweat stung her eyes. Her mouth was dry. But her hands remained steady on the gun. The tactical situation was deteriorating. Riley could hear the strain in the radio communications. Multiple casualties reported. Ammunition running low across several positions. The enemy seemed to have unlimited fighters, rotating fresh troops into the assault, while the defenders grew increasingly exhausted. "Command, this is Chen," Riley transmitted during a brief lull. "I'm seeing enemy forces massing in the tree line northeast of my position. Looks like they're preparing for another major push. I can hit them before they organize, but I'll need to expose myself more to get the angle." "Negative, Chen," Dawson responded immediately. "Maintain current position and defensive fire only." Riley watched through her sights as the enemy fighters continued to mass. They were grouping for a coordinated assault that would hit multiple sides of the base simultaneously. If they launched that attack, the defenders would be overwhelmed. Someone needed to disrupt that formation now, before they were ready. "Sir, if they get that assault organized, we won't be able to stop it," Riley argued. "I can break up their formation, but I need to act now. We'll be completely exposed, Chen. It's too risky." Riley made a decision that would either save the base or end her life. "With respect, sir, I'm taking the shot." She shifted the gun to the extreme edge of its firing arc, exposing herself to enemy fire from multiple angles. The moment she opened fire on the massing troops, every enemy fighter with a clear line of sight would target her position. The damaged tower might not survive the concentrated fire, She might not survive, but those troops couldn't be allowed to organize their assault. Riley had trained for years to be a soldier, to make difficult decisions in combat, to put mission and unit before personal safety. This was that moment. She took a breath, settled her aim on the enemy formation, and squeezed the trigger. The 50 cal roared, sending devastating fire into the massing troops. Chaos erupted in the enemy position as fighters scrambled for cover. The formation broke apart, the coordinated assault disrupted before it could begin. And then, as Riley had known would happen, every enemy weapon that could target her position opened fire. The world became a storm of bullets and explosions, all focused on one small soldier in a damaged tower who refused to abandon her post. The concentrated enemy fire was unlike anything Riley had experienced in training. Bullets struck all around her, impacting sandbags and metal supports with steady percussion. She pressed herself as low as possible behind the gun's shield while continuing to fire. If she stopped shooting, the enemy would resume organizing. She had to maintain pressure. Another RPG struck the tower, this time hitting a support beam directly. The entire structure lurched violently. Riley grabbed the gun mount to avoid being thrown off the platform. Metal screamed in protest as welds began to fail. The tower was going to collapse any second. "Chen, the tower's coming down?" Martinez shouted through the radio. "Get out now." Riley fired one more long burst into the enemy position, then made her move. She couldn't climb down. There wasn't time. The tower was already buckling beneath her. She did the only thing possible. She jumped. The drop was about 15 feet to the ground. Riley landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact the way she'd been taught in airborne training. Pain shot through her ankle, but she forced herself up and limped toward cover. Behind her, the north tower collapsed with a deafening crash of metal and wood. She'd barely made it to a defensive bunker. When enemy fighters rushed the position the tower had been protecting, without that heavy weapon keeping them suppressed, they saw an opportunity to breach the perimeter. But they'd underestimated the base's defenders. The collapsed tower had drawn attention, and multiple soldiers now had clear fields of fire on the approaching enemy. Riley added her rifle to the defensive fire, dropping 2 attackers before the rest retreated back to cover. "Chen's status?" Dawson's voice came through her radio, and for once it didn't carry judgment, just concern. "Tower's down, but I'm mobile," Riley responded, checking her ammunition. "Ankles twisted, but functional." "Where do you need me?" "Get to the aid station. That's an order." "Negative, sir." "I can still fight." "Where do you need me?" There was a pause, then Dawson's voice came back. "West wall. They're getting hammered over there and they need another rifle." Riley grabbed extra magazines from the collapsed towers, scattered ammunition, and headed west. Ignoring the sharp pain in her ankle, the west defensive position was indeed under heavy pressure. 3 soldiers were holding a section that should have been manned by 6. She slid into position next to a young private named Torres who looked terrified, but was still firing effectively. "Chen, thank God, we're getting overwhelmed here." "Not anymore," Riley said, bringing her rifle up and engaging targets. "We hold this position. They don't get through." The 4 soldiers worked together, creating overlapping fields of fire that made advancing costly for the attackers. Riley's marksmanship proved invaluable. While the others provided suppressing fire, she took careful shots, eliminating enemy fighters or trying to organize their assault. Then Riley heard the sound she'd been waiting for. Helicopter rotors. The distinctive thump-thump of Apache attack helicopters approaching. Air support had finally arrived. "All positions, this is command. Air support is engaging. Maintain defensive positions and mark your locations with smoke." The Apache swept over the battlefield like avenging angels. Their cannons and missiles devastated the enemy positions. Fighters who'd been advancing suddenly found themselves exposed and retreating. The coordinated assault fell apart as the enemy forces broke and scattered. But even with air support, the fight wasn't over. Some enemy fighters continued attacking, either too committed to retreat or unable to escape. Riley and the other defenders maintained their positions, picking off targets while the helicopters worked over the main enemy formations. 35 minutes after the attack began, it was finally over. The surviving enemy fighters had withdrawn, leaving behind casualties and abandoned equipment. The base was secure, though battered and damaged. Riley sat with her back against the west wall sandbags, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion and pain. Her shoulder was purple with bruising from the 50 cal's recoil. Her ankle was swollen and throbbing. Her ears rang from the constant gunfire, but she was alive, and more importantly, the base had held. Martinez appeared, limping slightly from his own wounds. He sat down next to Riley without speaking, just being present. After a moment, he pulled out his canteen and handed it to her. She drank gratefully, the water heavenly after the intensity of combat. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," Martinez said quietly. "Staying on that tower when everyone knew it was about to collapse. Breaking up that enemy formation, even though you knew they'd target you. You saved this base, Riley. You saved all of us." Riley didn't know how to respond to that. She'd just done what needed doing. What any soldier in her position should have done. Sergeant Dawson approached, his expression unreadable. Riley tensed, expecting criticism for disobeying his order to evacuate the tower. Instead, Dawson extended his hand to help her up. "Chen, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I judged you by your size instead of your capability. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What you did today, that wasn't just courage. That was exceptional soldiering under impossible circumstances." The base spent the next several hours dealing with the aftermath. Medical personnel worked frantically to stabilize the wounded before transport helicopters arrived to evacuate them. Engineers assessed structural damage to determine what could be quickly repaired and what needed major reconstruction. Everyone else worked to restore defensive positions in case of another attack. Riley refused medical evacuation despite her injuries. Her ankle was sprained, not broken, and her shoulder bruising, while painful, didn't prevent her from functioning. Others needed those evacuation seats more than she did. She helped however she could, moving supplies, assisting with casualty care, and maintaining watch rotations. The final casualty count could have been much worse. 5 soldiers had been killed in action, 12 were seriously wounded, and nearly everyone had minor injuries. Against a force 3 times their size, the defenders had held their ground and survived. Intelligence later confirmed at least 40 enemy casualties, with many more wounded who'd been carried away during the retreat. That evening, after the immediate crisis had passed, the unit gathered for a brief memorial service for their fallen comrades. Riley stood silently with the others, paying respect to soldiers she'd known and served with. The weight of survival guilt pressed down on her. Why had she lived when others hadn't? Had she done enough? Could she have saved more lives? Martinez seemed to read her thoughts. After the service, he found Riley sitting alone outside the command bunker. "Don't do that to yourself." "Do what?" "Second-guess every decision. Wonder if you could have done more. I've seen it before, survivors questioning themselves. You did everything humanly possible today. More than most people could have done. Those soldiers died because we were attacked by a superior force, not because you weren't good enough." Riley nodded but didn't fully believe it. The doubts would linger, probably forever. That seemed to be part of the price of survival the following day. A colonel arrived from headquarters to assess the situation and conduct initial debriefings. Riley gave her statement, walking through the timeline of events as objectively as possible. The colonel listened without interrupting, taking notes. "Private Chen, I've spoken with multiple soldiers from your unit, including Sergeant Dawson. They all credit you with being the primary reason this base wasn't overrun. The North Tower position was critical, and your refusal to abandon it during the initial assault disrupted enemy plans. Your decision to target their massing formation, despite the personal risk, prevented what would have been a coordinated assault on multiple sides of the base." "I was just doing my duty," Sir Riley said. "No," the colonel replied firmly. "Duty is showing up and following orders. What you did went far beyond duty. You showed initiative, tactical awareness, and exceptional courage under fire. I'm recommending you for a Silver Star." Riley was stunned. The Silver Star was one of the military's highest decorations for valor. "Sir, I don't deserve that. I just did what anyone would have done. Private Chen, stop selling yourself short, the colonel said, his tone almost fatherly. I've read your service record. You've been consistently underestimated and underutilized because of your physical size. Yesterday proved conclusively that combat effectiveness has nothing to do with how tall you are or how much you weigh. It's about skill, determination, and mental toughness. You have all three in abundance. After the colonel left, Riley found herself suddenly surrounded by soldiers from her unit. Torres, the young private from the West Wall, spoke first. Chen, I just want to say thank you. When you showed up at our position, I honestly thought we were done for. You kept us together and kept us fighting. I wouldn't be here without you. Others echoed similar sentiments. Soldiers she'd barely spoken to before the attack now treated her with respect and genuine camaraderie. The invisible wall that had existed between Riley and the rest of the unit had disappeared. Torn down by shared combat experience, even the soldiers who'd been most dismissive of her capabilities came forward with apologies. One corporal who'd openly questioned her assignment to the unit looked embarrassed as he approached. Chen, I said some things before the attack. Things about you not being fit for combat duty. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You're a better soldier than most of us could ever hope to be. Riley appreciated the apologies, though part of her felt frustrated that it had taken a life-or-death situation to prove what should have been obvious from her performance record. Why did women, especially smaller women, have to demonstrate extraordinary courage just to be treated with the basic respect that male soldiers received automatically? But she kept those thoughts to herself. Change happened slowly, and at least this unit had learned the lesson. Maybe their attitudes would influence other units, other soldiers. Maybe the next small woman who joined a combat unit wouldn't face the same automatic dismissal that Riley had endured. That night Riley lay in her bunk replaying the battle in her mind. The fear, the adrenaline, the split-second decisions that meant life or death. She'd been tested in the most extreme way possible and discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Not physical strength, though she'd certainly needed that too, but the mental and emotional strength to stand firm when everything inside screamed to run. 3 weeks after the attack, Riley stood in formation as the silver star was pinned to her uniform. The ceremony was held at a larger base, with press present and senior officers in attendance. The military had decided to publicize the story. Using it to highlight the capabilities of women in combat roles, Riley felt uncomfortable with the attention. She'd never sought recognition or fame, but she understood the larger significance. Other women serving or considering military service would see this ceremony and know that they, too, could succeed in combat. Roles regardless of their size or gender. The citation was read aloud, describing her actions in formal military language that somehow made the experience sound more heroic and less terrifying than it had actually been. When the medal was pinned on, Riley maintained her composure, standing at attention with proper military bearing. Inside, she thought of the 5 soldiers who hadn't survived, wondering if they would have preferred the recognition she was receiving. After the ceremony, she was approached by a young woman in uniform, a private who couldn't have been more than 18 years old. Ma'am, I just wanted to thank you. I'm about to start infantry training, and I've been scared because I'm small like you. Everyone keeps telling me I can't do it. But seeing what you did, knowing that someone my size held off an entire assault force, that gives me hope. Riley looked at the young woman and saw herself several years ago, full of determination, but constantly told she wasn't enough. Don't let anyone define your limits based on their assumptions. Your size doesn't determine your capability. Your training, your skills, your dedication, those things matter. Work hard, stay focused, and prove yourself through performance. That's all you can do. Private nodded eagerly, clearly inspired. As she walked away, Martinez appeared at Riley's side. He'd also been decorated for his actions during the battle, though with a lower award. How does it feel? Being a symbol? He asked with a slight smile. Weird, Riley admitted. I'm just a soldier who did her job. I don't want to be a symbol or a poster child for anything. Too late for that, Martinez said, not unkindly. Whether you want it or not, what you did matters to people. That private who just talked to you? She'll remember this moment for the rest of her career. You gave her something to believe in, Riley sighed. I suppose that's worth the discomfort. It is, Martinez agreed. Besides, think about what you've already changed. Dawson went from thinking women couldn't handle combat to personally recommending you for promotion and special operations training. The entire unit treats you as an equal now. That's real progress. He was right. Riley had been offered several opportunities following the battle. Special operations wanted to evaluate her for advanced training. Multiple units had requested her transfer. She'd even received a personal letter from a general, commending her service and encouraging her to pursue leadership positions. Riley had spent years fighting to be taken seriously, to be given real opportunities. Now those opportunities were finally available. The question was what she wanted to do with them. She decided to accept the special operations evaluation. It would be incredibly challenging, pushing her to her absolute limits both physically and mentally. But if she qualified, she'd be part of an elite unit where performance was all that mattered. No more fighting against assumptions about her capabilities. Just pure meritocracy. 6 months later, Riley stood on a different base. Having successfully completed the grueling special operations training, she was now part of an elite team, one of only 3 women in the unit. The selection process had been brutal, designed to identify soldiers with exceptional skills and unbreakable determination. Riley had proven she possessed both. Her new team accepted her without question. They'd all read about the battle, all knew what she was capable of doing. Her size was noted, but never treated as a limitation. Instead, they viewed it as an advantage in certain situations where a smaller soldier could access spaces. Others couldn't. On her first mission with the team, Riley found herself in a situation that would have been impossible for larger soldiers. They needed someone to navigate through a narrow drainage tunnel to access a target building from an unexpected direction. Riley volunteered immediately as she crawled through the tight space, her rifle held in front of her and her heart steady despite the claustrophobic environment. She thought about how far she'd come. From being told she was too weak, too small, too much of a liability, to being an essential member of an elite special operations team, she'd held the line when everyone expected her to fail. She'd proven that strength came in many forms, and that size was just one variable among many that determined combat effectiveness. Most importantly, she'd shown that determination and skill could overcome any physical disadvantage. Riley emerged from the tunnel into the target building, quickly securing the entry point for her team to follow. The mission proceeded flawlessly, and as they extracted afterward, her team leader gave her an approving nod. A good work. Chen couldn't have done it without you. Those simple words meant more than any medal or ceremony. This was true acceptance, true respect earned through demonstrated capability. Riley had stopped being the soldier who was too weak and become simply a soldier. A skilled operator whose size was irrelevant compared to her abilities. She'd held the line not just during that desperate battle, but every day since, refusing to let doubt or prejudice limit her potential. And in doing so, she'd helped open doors for every woman who would come after her, proving that courage and capability knew no size requirements.